Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Holly, and today, instead of doing a project from beginning to end, I thought I would take you along with me to show how I would fix a tumbler that has been dropped. This one was bought by a customer, and it's a coworker of mine, and she bought it for her husband, and he accidentally dropped it. There was an issue with the lid, and then the cup dropped, and so I am going to fix this for her free of charge because it had a faulty lid on it, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. I used an orbital sander. This one is really not the best. It stops and catches, and I don't know if it's just a cheap sander or I just don't know what in the world I'm doing, but it took about an hour to get the epoxy and paint off the bottom of the tumbler. Periodically, I stopped and used a 60 grit sanding block and used some acetone to scrape out the epoxy that was in the grooves. I am wearing a half mask, the same mask that I wear when I'm using epoxy because that dust is flying everywhere. And I'm also wearing goggles. It's a very attractive look. Along with sanding the entire bottom of that tumbler, I also used the same orbital sander and the 60 grit sanding block to go around the base of the tumbler to expose a strip of stainless. And this time I'm not going to paint or epoxy all the way around the tumbler. I'm just going to go right to the bottom of the black line that I'm going to respray. And that way, if it gets dropped again, maybe it won't do too much damage and I won't have so much repair. Now, I don't know if it was the drop or what, but when I stood this tumbler up, it was unlevel. So I don't know if I sanded too much off or the drop dented. I'm not really sure because it was sitting level before I sanded it. So what I decided to do is pop that bottom off. And I think this is one of the steel magnolia tumblers. So I just pop that bottom off, and I'm going to put some black epoxy in there, some black. I'm going to use a black additive to put in the epoxy just to create a straight black base because the owner of this tumbler does not want glitter. And so I thought that would be the best thing to do to make it all match all the way around. Since I'm going to be respraying the black spray paint anyway, I decided to go ahead and just do a straight black base, still leaving that stainless steel exposed. So no glitter, but like my previous tumblers, just a straight black base. Before I take it outside to spray, I'm going to tape off that bottom rim of stainless steel, and then I'm going to bring that tape up over the edge and kind of pucker it down into that indentation where I popped off the base. And then I'm going to cut with my craft knife around that edge so that I can also spray paint the inner circle base of it. I hope that makes sense. You'll see what I'm talking about. Once I have that little strip of stainless taped off, I'm adding more tape just slightly above, the placement's going to be just a little bit above where that chipping from the drop begins, and also just barely above where I was really sanding pretty aggressively around that chipped area. And then I'm going to use a spray paint to catch that bottom piece that's exposed, as well as the base of the tumbler that's not taped off. So then it's ready for spray paint. I took it outside and I sprayed it a flat black spray paint. Let that dry a little bit. I used my heat gun to speed up the drying process, and then kind of walked away from it for about an hour. And then noticed that the spray paint didn't look like it was gonna match up. Even if I put a clear gloss or the epoxy over the top of it, there was something about the spray paint that didn't match. And I thought, oh shoot, what did I use? I wasn't sure if I used spray paint originally or if I used a Crystalac product, the black Crystalac base for this tumbler, or I wasn't really sure. And then I wasn't sure if I had another black spray paint. I did. So redoing the whole taping process, I went ahead and sprayed it a semi-gloss black, and that seemed to do the trick. And when I eyeballed it, it looked like those two sheens, or it's hard to tell because the whole tumbler is not sanded. The whole tumbler, the top half of it is still shiny and it has epoxy on it. So the sheen is really hard to tell but I've worked with enough black spray paint that I can kind of see when it's going to match up and when it's not. So the semi-gloss to me looked like it would be a good match. I also had one little piece to fix toward the top because when I was sanding, I chipped off a portion of that color. So toward the top, I just put some more black paint right over the top and just, it's like 2 centimeters that I have to fix. And so I knew exactly what paint I used when I created this tumbler. And so I just grabbed that same paint and put it right over the top, let it dry, and it was perfect, good to go. So nobody will ever know that that little piece was taken off. All right, so once all that was done and taken care of, it was time to apply a layer of epoxy over the top. And hopefully it'll be the only layer I need to apply since really the tumbler is already completely finished. I just had that little bottom portion to fix. So I am using Jessica Flynn's epoxy for this project. It is really the only epoxy I've been trusting lately with black bases. I've been really happy with it as long as I am using epoxy that's been heated up. So her little tip is to use a baby bottle warmer, and then you pop the bottles of epoxy in the warmer for about 8 minutes. Then you just let it sit for a little bit, and then you can mix it. So I mix my epoxy for about 4 or 5-ish minutes until I no longer see the separation or the little swirls in the epoxy. So when you add the parts A and B and you start mixing, you see these little swirls where you can tell that it's still a little bit separated. And so I just mix until it's completely together. So it takes about 4 or 5 minutes to do that slowly. And then if you do it slowly with warm parts A and B, then you don't have very many bubbles. And so I've been really happy with this epoxy, using it on like a dark base where normally I would turn to like a crystalline product to put on a black base because I'm afraid of the micro bubbles. So this is the epoxy after my application, and it is going to dry overnight, and then I will come check on it in the morning. I did use a handheld torch, a little red one that I got from Amazon. It just has a little clicky button and you can just torch it really quickly. I used that once after I applied the epoxy, and then again about 10 minutes later. And just my little check is I use the light on my phone to shine over the black base, and that way you can see if there's a bunch of micro bubbles. And if I do see more micro bubbles, I'll hit it again really quickly with the torch a little later on. But you don't want to torch it too much, otherwise you might get fish eyes, which I haven't with this epoxy yet. So it can take a lot of heat, I've noticed, but you just want to be careful. So this epoxy has dried and it has dust all over it. Those are not micro bubbles. Those are little dust bunnies are floating around my craft room, unfortunately. But those just brush right off. So the epoxy I brought down to the bottom and all the way to the bottom, but I didn't wrap it around the base. And then I just took a paper towel with acetone with my thumb, a gloved finger or gloved thumb, and I just did one quick swoop right around the base of it just to make sure that no epoxy got on the base of it. If it did, you can just use a craft knife and scrape it off, but it looks good, minus that little dented section. Okay, and for the base, I'm using this resin dye that my son got me for Christmas. It was on my little wish list. He keeps asking me what I want for Christmas. I said, you get me crafting anything and I will be super happy. So this was on my wish list, and this is the first time using it. So I'm pulling out the black resin dye. It looks like alcohol ink, but it doesn't mix like alcohol ink. It's like a thicker consistency, which surprised me because on the box it says translucent. So it doesn't appear that it's going to be that translucent. So, I mean, I won't really know unless I put it over some other colors, like maybe I'll play with this dye for marbling and that kind of thing and see if I can actually see through the black once I put it on tumblers that have other glitter colors on them. But it's pretty cool. So thank you, my child, for giving me this for Christmas. So I'm just gonna mix it, no glitter, no sparkle, and just pour it right into the base. Let that sit overnight, and then this tumbler is done. I'm just gonna give it a little shake and turn it a little bit and let that spill into the sections that are still a little empty, and give it a little bit of time before I hit it with a torch to pop some of those bubbles. And then I'm gonna come back again about 10 minutes later and torch it again to pop some more bubbles and just leave it alone. After about 48 hours, I gave it a good wash with Dawn dish soap, made sure that I rewrapped it just like I did when it was brand new, and now it's ready to give back to the owner. So I hope she likes my repairs. As always, please leave any questions or comments below, and thank you so much for stopping by to watch this video. If you would like to make a tumbler like this one, I am leaving a link to the video that I actually uploaded into YouTube where I show you how to make tumblers just like this. So thank you again.